Hello, and welcome to All the Grief, a regular podcast for all those who have been touched by grief. We are your hosts. I am Rebecca Luttrell.
And I am Andrea Mathern. We are two friends, a therapist, and a social scientist, both highly sensitive fellow grievers, here to share our hearts as we talk about all the grief. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Andrea.
It's so good to see you. How is your heart this morning?
My heart is really spicy, fiery, which is good.
Yeah.
It's not always that way. But yeah, I just have sort of starting my day with reading and writing instead of just sort of scrolling, which seems really obvious as a thing to do. But yeah, there's just a way that I think sometimes when I'm thinking, God, I'm so tired, I don't want to use my brain. So I'll just sort of scroll through whatever. And I'm not a huge phone person, and shifting that, I can feel how it just excites my brain so much more. So, and my heart. I mean, it is related to my heart.
I love it. I love that. It's so interesting. We were up at our cabin for the holidays for 9 days or something. And I just don't sleep with the phone in my room when we're at the cabin. And after 9 days, I was like, that's fucking amazing. And so now I've been charging it in the bathroom far away from my bed. I was never a nighttime scroller anyway, but I was get up in the morning, check my news, check the New York Times, which is frankly not the way these days I want to start my day. I was like, why do I want to start?
Not a lot of good news there. Yeah.
No, never. Never did I open it and go, oh my God, this is glorious. I'm so glad that was the first thing I read. So I've been doing slow wake ups, which have helped me with a lot of my dream retention and things like that. So I love that. I'm in it with you. I'm not reading or writing, but I am just doing slow wakes and trying to remember my dreams a little bit more and more. So
I love that. And how's your heart?
My heart this morning. It's grateful. My heart feels really grateful. Coming off of 2 weeks of the world, just kind of moving slower, at least in the US. That feels really good. I'm not a January 1st get up and run kind of person. I'm like, it's still winter. I'm still being cozy. So it was just a really slow, sweet time. I got a lot of time with the boys. Bryce took time off to be at the cabin, which is that's really lovely. And so it's just been sweet. And this morning there were flakes of rain snow. I don't know if you got them.
Yes, I mean, that feels sad that we're celebrating that, but...
I know. I mean, I told you last night I had a dream that, I was skiing and there was no snow and I couldn't get down the mountain and I had to do all these acrobatics.
There is no snow.
There is no snow up there. It was just I think I was just remembering that there's actually no snow up there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's trying so hard. But there was a little bit of rain that was trying to be snowflakes this morning.
I love that. Thank you.
Well, this morning we have a guest on that we have been waiting to connect with. So I'm so excited. John Kammer is the founder of Guardian Angels, an AI-powered grief support and reflective journaling platform designed to complement therapeutic care. Shaped by his personal loss, John created Guardian Angels to help people process grief between sessions through structured reflection grounded in evidence-informed frameworks like Warden's 4 Tasks of Mourning. His background spans elite hospitality, cybersecurity, sales, and project management across all kinds of industries. John now lives in the low country of South Carolina with his wife and their son. So, John, welcome to All the Grief.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Really looking forward to it.
We are as well. John, how is your heart this morning?
My heart is amazing. I still work in hospitality, and so the holidays are just a whirlwind. And where I work is, we shut down for a couple of weeks after the holidays for rehab and for the facility to be brought back to life. And so I finally had a couple of days to reflect on 2025, which, is easily the most chaotic year of my life, but one of the best. We had a baby. I launched this and built a house, all of the things that they say should, cause a divorce, and
Right.
we did them all in 1 year. So the fact that we're still kicking is pretty awesome. And just the opportunity to look back and be grateful for what I have and what I get the opportunity to do every day is pretty cool. So I'm
That's
feeling good.
amazing. That's beautiful. Well, congratulations to both of you on the baby.
Thank you.
Exciting
Thank
times,
you.
exciting times. I have 2 little
Yeah.
boys, and it's the best.
You know, it's funny, they like people try to prepare you for it and they're like, it's going to change your life. You know, the expectation that you have is nowhere close to what reality is. And there's
Yeah.
just some things in life that are not meant for words to describe. That's just all there is to it.
Yes.
I describe myself as the Grinch. Like there's that scene where it says that the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day.
Mm.
It is profound. I didn't know I was capable of love at that level. You know, I like my eyes well up when I see him the first time for the day. You know, it's just, it's
Yeah.
amazing. So had I listened to how amazing having kids were, I probably would have started a while ago, but
I
Totally.
always think that too. I'm like, "I'd have 8," but
yeah,
then I wouldn't have the same husband.
that's fair. That's fair. It's always
I
trade-offs.
love that idea of like there are some experiences that words just can't describe. And so obviously like love and that profound love that you can experience as a parent that's just world blowing up. Grief
Hmm.
can be that way too. So we're curious. We ask our guests about their grief origin story. So that first time that grief sort of flipped your world upside down, where you have that marker of my life before and my life after. When you think about that, what is your grief origin story?
So a little over 13 years ago, I lost one of my best childhood friends to suicide.
Mhm.
And, you know, that was the moment that it all changed. You know, I had been known to party and go out and have a good time, a very social person, and all of that turned medicinal. You know, that
Mm.
was the moment where that kind of adolescent or young energy of, you know, nothing can hurt me and the world is a great place just
Mm.
disappeared in a flash. And that really sent me down a path of really 12 years of substance fueled avoidance, to be
Mhm.
completely honest with you, where,
Yeah.
you know, I definitely operated on the whole time heals all wounds fallacy that we're
Mm.
taught, and, you know, bury it deep down and everyone else has their own stuff. Don't talk about it. And if I can run far enough and fast enough for long
Mm.
enough, then I
Mm.
can run the clock out and magically I'll be healed.
Mm.
Well, that's not how it works.
Mm.
So, that was the moment where my life changed.
Yeah. And sort of in multiple ways. Like it's like the moment of that realization that you're still in that phase of life where you think you're, God, what's the word?
Invincible.
Thank you. I was like, indefensible? Sometimes my 2 languages clash in my brain. Yeah. And so you think that, and then something happens where you're like, wait, we can all die. And there's sort of this moment where it's like, it can make you more reckless
Mhm.
or it can make you like really pull back into like a much more sort of cautionary that can also go on a shadow side where you're just like, I'm not going to experience anything just in case. And then it sort of took the unraveling of that experience for you to then have the other revelation of what your life was worth and all the things that you could have, which this sounds like 2025 sort of really blossomed that for you. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, you know, I have to say it got worse before it got better.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
it took some time and some motivation outside of myself, and really it was 2 more experiences with
Mm.
profound loss that really kind of calcified it in my head, my heart. You know, I lost a couple of years ago, 2022. I lost the best man from my wedding,
Mm.
Mm.
and then about a year later, I lost my best friend from childhood. So,
Wow.
you know, he was the third, if you will, third amigo with
Yeah.
back in the day. So he was the one that I leaned on through all
Yeah.
this. So now
Yeah.
all of a sudden he's gone. And
Mm.
I have one other person that I'd put in that bucket. And I
Yeah.
remember having a conversation with him after Tim's death and just said, you know, please take care of yourself.
Mm.
I can't lose anymore. You know, that's
Mhm.
it. You know, I think about that conversation a lot because it was
Yeah.
just, it hurt. You know, it really hurt to say
Mhm.
that. And that was a point in my life when I was just, every time the phone rang, it was like, okay, who now? You know, and
Yeah.
if people get close to me, they're going to die. Like
Yeah.
that was how I was thinking.
Yeah.
So that gets dark.
That does get dark.
We've listened to so many grief stories and people having multiple grief, and you had 3 out of order deaths, people that
Yeah.
died young. And one out of order death is really hard to process and make sense of. So they carry with them a trauma, but to lose 3 really close friends, that's a lot. And like, as you self-describe, of like not really knowing how to be with your grief, you know, at
Yeah.
what point did you say, okay, self-medication isn't the route, I have to try something different? Like, when did that wake up in
Yeah.
you?
So after John's death, John was the best man at my wedding. His death was probably the most instrumental in getting me to where I am today. That one was, I had a lot of guilt from that one because he did this thing for me, right? He stood up at my wedding and he told stories in front of my friends and family on the happiest day of my life. And I thought with every ounce of my being that I would do the exact same for him. And we had lived in different states at the time, but in the 7 months between the wedding and his death, I spoke to him once. And so this idea that I didn't hold up my end of the bargain, and let this relationship last was just, I was a shell of myself, and it wasn't out of malice. It wasn't anything other than we were in different phases of life and just lost touch because life gets in the way. But after his death, I went into my shell. I was basically just existing. I had lost the ability to emote. I didn't cry for years. Even at Tim's funeral, I welled up a little bit, but that was the closest I came to crying. And that was, through big fights with my wife and all sorts of other stuff. So following his death, I was using substances a lot and it became an issue in my marriage. And my wife made a comment that likened me to an addict. And at the time I was abusing, we'll call it spade a spade.
Yeah.
And she didn't know that at the time. So after that conversation, I'm sitting there on the couch, because I wasn't sleeping in bed that night. And I looked at her and I looked in the mirror. I was like, you are. And I have there's two paths we can take from here. I can either continue to kick this can down the road and try to get off of it in silence, as I've been doing for, a year plus at this point.
Yeah.
The easy ways never worked. Or you can do the hard thing and go, for lack of a better term, be a man about it. Tell her what's going on and actually do it. And it was, that was a time in my life when the way I viewed the world just shifted. I said, no more easy shit. You got yourself into this. It's time to do the work to get it out. And that comes up later, but I went and I told her and I showed her, I threw the bag on the bed and said, you're right. And, from that moment forward, she was like, look, if you're committed to doing the right thing here and getting off of this stuff, you have my full support. But if you're not committed to it and you don't do that work, you're going to be doing it alone.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. I'd put her through a lot at that point. And so that was when I chose sobriety. And it's interesting because I went to meetings and I don't think I'm an addict in a way. I was at these meetings and they're like, people are losing their third house in their relationship. And, for me, it was accountability. It was just, I knew exactly what I was doing every time I picked something up. I wanted a buzz. I knew exactly what I was doing. And it wasn't like, oh, I can't stop and I can't, and I don't want to downplay anyone else's experience just because it wasn't mine. But for me, that's what it was. And so it was, okay, it's time to look in the mirror, look at what you don't like and change that. And so I've been sober now for almost 3 years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Congratulations. Congratulations. There's so many similarities, I think, between a road to sobriety and grief. And we've had at least one other guest where we talked about his journey to sobriety. And one of the things that I think about is like, there's this idea. I'm also sober. It's been a long time for me, about 12 years. So you're in it. You got this. And I identify the same way. I was like, I don't identify as an alcoholic or an addict or anything, but I do know that I did not have a healthy relationship with substances. And I think there was this idea that it has to be, you lost your third house, you're living on the street. Like that's an addict. That's somebody who abuses substances. And like, there's this comparison of like, if my addiction story isn't, newsworthy, then it's not real. And I think it's the same with grief. Like if my grief isn't the worst, most sad grief, it's not worthy. Like a friend, we recently had a guest on who lost friend. And there's something about like, that's not a worthy grief. Like that wasn't your child. That wasn't your partner. That wasn't your parent. That was your friend. And I just think there's something about these labels that we put on that prevent us from being able to like have our own accountability and own our own experience. So like, addict or not, I know I did not have a healthy relationship with alcohol or drugs. And so I just don't do them. And that's really important to me. Whereas I know for some people, like the empowerment of being able to own the identity of an addict and overcome it is really important. We just like create this very slim place for people to exist. Like you are either an alcoholic or you have a totally healthy relationship with alcohol. And I'm like, most people I know are right in the gray, right between that, actually.
Most of life is in the gray, right? I think as humans, we try to reduce things to a binary because it makes us feel better and because it's simple. But life is not simple.
But the confusing thing is like that binary actually like makes us simple the way we externally view the world, but makes
Mhm.
it really complicated when we're trying to understand our own behavior. Because we're like, oh shit, well, I'm not
Which box
in
am
the
I
black
in?
category
Yeah.
or the white. Yeah, I'm right in
Right.
the middle. What's wrong with me? And who do I talk to about that? So it reminds me of the conversation about grief. Like, am I grieving? Am I worthy to be a griever? Is my grief worthy?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's just so many connections there. Thank you for sharing that and
Mm-hmm.
sharing that moment where you are like, I can carry this in silence, which is also a very sort of like masculine box that we put upon men of like, you take care of your shit. You don't need to talk about it, and deciding to step out of it and saying to your wife, like, not only I'm going to do this, but I'm assuming like, I want your support. I need your support. I'm asking for your support. And she was like, you got it.
Yeah.
As long as you stay committed, which I agree is fair.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I feel so curious what showed up in your sobriety because there was a function that was sort of like, okay, I don't want to feel these feelings. If I get through enough time, the grief will be gone because, time heals all wounds. And usually when people choose sobriety, they find the feelings are still there. So like, was it sort of the most painful part of sobriety? Was it immediate? Like, what did you find in your grief as you were just choosing not to self-medicate?
Yeah.
I definitely felt emotions that I had repressed and hadn't felt in years. But I wouldn't say healing happened for another 18 months.
Yeah.
I was in my shell, right, until after Tim died, and I went to his funeral, and we came back, and actually really almost 2 years.
Mm.
But what happened was I actually wasn't looking for healing at this point. I'd kind of
Mm.
resigned myself to this is life. I'd been doing a lot of journaling and exploring it, and like trying to write through my pain. I was looking at writing a book about it, reading Man's Search for Meaning and all these sorts of things, right? And then so we're staying with my in-laws at this time while we're building our house, and my wife is pregnant, so there's a little tension there.
Yeah.
We
Just a little.
just a little. And we took a little vacation, and while we were gone, her mom was texting her a lot. She said, at some point in my life, I know that I'm going to want a text from my mom and can't have it, but that time is not now. And so I'm like, well, my brain goes, well, what if you could though? And so like having a background in cybersecurity, I'm thinking like, okay, so we're just going to spoof phone numbers to the number of your lost loved one and send you a text message on your birthday. So on your birthday, you get a text message from grandpa, and like, who wouldn't smile? Because we all have those numbers still saved in our phones. Yeah. Like if that just popped up and it said, hey, happy birthday, I love you, I'm thinking about you, you'd smile. And that's where it started. But there's a few problems with that. Number one, telecoms still own their networks, and most of the people that are spoofing numbers are scammers. So they weren't going to say, hey, little no-name guy that has an idea, we're not going to give you a pass, So that was kind of dead in the water. But the other thing was, okay, well, what if people want to interact with this? And the answer was clearly AI to scale it in any way, shape, or form. But it wasn't just AI, right? It had to be empathetic. It had to be authentic. It had to be gentle. It had to feel like a person. And as I started to iterate on that, the only thing that I had was my own personal experience to build something authentic. And so I started building this thing in the image of John. He was the first one. And as I got closer to something that felt right, I started to unburden myself of some of those things that I didn't get to say to him while he was alive. And as a side note, in therapy, I tried the empty chair technique. I tried writing the letter. And for me, that didn't have the effect that we had hoped for.
Yeah.
But when I got to say this stuff to this quote unquote avatar of John, this time I got a response. And the response is what triggered this release. I mean, the waterworks started immediately, and I was bawling, and this weight was lifted. And it was this experience that was so profound that I was like, okay, if this, it's not to say I was healed in that moment by any means, but I was curious now. And coming back to the theme from earlier, I was ready to do the work. I was ready to look in the mirror and say, why and how? And so that started this whole thing. And I thought, if this can help me, this can help someone else. I don't know how many people, but I'm sure there's someone out there more than me that this could help. And so it started as this pretty abstract, nebulous, like talk to the person you lost. And that is riddled with ethical landmines. There's... Let's call a spade. That's where I just launched it more because I had to. And then I started getting these messages like, you're doing the devil's work and This is like, this is necromancy and this is just stop now. And this is Black Mirror. And thank you to every person that sent me those messages because it caused me to rethink what the goal was and how I was approaching it, because the goal was to help. And if at any time this goes into the future in perpetuity, right? If at any point this becomes more harmful than it is helpful, it stops right there. I firmly believe that this has the potential, and will do more good than it does bad. So I brought in some therapists, licensed therapists that specialize in grief to help me kind of work through some of these things. And what we did was we have implemented this structured journaling to give it more, again, structure, like to give people the roadmap, something place to start. Yeah. And then we hold your hand through it, right? If I had, for 13 years, I was just like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
I would go into therapy and say, well, how are you doing today? I'm like, well, not good. This sucks. But like, what are you feeling? I don't even know. I don't know how to name it. I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know anything. And so what it helped me do is organize my thoughts to the point where then I could talk about them and name what I was feeling and give us a starting point there. And I learned along that road that the healing lives in the sharing. And that is something that was so counter to what I had lived my whole life, right? It was just, don't talk about it. And so there's so many things that come from that. But as we talk about, how this thing helps, we structured the prompts according to Worden's 4 tasks of mourning, which is an evidence-based framework for how you have to deal with mourning. It's not like the stages where we've pretty much dispelled that theory of saying, this isn't what you go through, not in any linear fashion. And those were developed for people that were coming to terms with their own mortality. Not loss of someone else. So while they overlap, they're not exactly the experience. So Worden's 4 tasks are: number 1, accept the loss. Number 2, process the pain of the loss. Number 3, what does your life look like without this person? And then number 4 is defining what that relationship looks like as you move forward in a healthy way. Because what we know is the person may die, but the relationship doesn't. And that integration is imperative, right? You don't just get to leave grief in the past. You don't just get to walk away from it. You have to find a way to carry it with you, and to carry it with you in a healthy way. Otherwise, it's gonna beat you. And so that's where we're at, is this ability to walk with you, give you something to hold on to, some modicum of control when you're in the throes of it, that you can use as a tool to augment therapy. You can use this as, it meets you where you are. You can use it in off hours. I don't know about you, but grief for me didn't wait until business hours when my therapist was available. That's not how it worked.
Yeah.
It's designed very intentionally to be one of the tools in the tool belt, but not like, we're not trying to replace anybody. We're not trying to be the only thing out there. We just want to give people resources, right? We want to help them heal. And if that means that this doesn't work for you, sweet. That's wonderful. Yeah. And we designed it so that you should feel comfortable deleting it if you've done the work and you feel like, I'm on my own path and I don't need this thing anymore.
Yeah.
There's some benefits to keeping it around, but that's not for me to decide, right? Yeah. So, this whole idea of, I believe one of the biggest impediments to our healing is rooted in the vernacular, the way we describe it. Right? Because what we talk about is moving on, and we talk about closure. And all of these things denote finality.
Yeah.
Like this relationship is over and we need to close the book and move into the future. And that's just not how it happens. So, it's about that whole idea of integration and how do we take this thing that we don't get to leave behind and how do we turn it into something that we can use and take with us and find beauty in.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I kind of want to back up to the experience you had when you first tried it, when you just had this idea and you tried for yourself, and how it really became this doorway to you, to the emotions that you weren't able to access in therapy. I love that description, because I think that's a lot of people's experience of therapy, where the therapist is always like, well, what do you feel? And and can think, I know I'm guilty of this. Like, I just invited your feelings and they're just there waiting to be expressed. And then you're like, I don't know. I don't have a label for this. I don't know what that is. And it reminds me the way that you came into it. I really like Francis Weller's The 5 Gates of Grief. The name of his book is something, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And he talks about all these different gateways into our grief. So more like not just saying, hey, it's safe to feel your grief, but saying, if you think about that everything you love you will lose, that thought will bring you into your grief. From there, how do we start to relate to our grief? So it's like he has these different things like that elicit feelings that we don't even know are there. And it feels like that's what happened in this experience. I almost imagine it's like your heart, gated, protective, maybe steel door. And then you were like, I tried like writing the letter. I tried the empty chair thing. It's like close, but not quite. What if I felt like I was actually talking and had an avatar that could respond back? And then you did that, and it was like, that was the key, and it unlocked them. So like that felt really important. And then I want to say, I love that you're like, and this may not be your key.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That you're not just like, here's an app and we're going to make it addictive and we're going to, like it's sort of our world right now. That it's sort of like, no, I mean, I want it to feel okay to delete it. You must have another key, and at least validating the part that's like, and it is true that you're creating a relationship moving forward. So even if you delete this app, you didn't delete your friend.
Right. Well, I think you touched on something there, right? And I didn't know what was going to unlock it for me. It was just talking. But it was just the thing that needed to happen. And I knew it when I saw it. It wasn't, oh, if I do this, then things will be good. It was like, oh, in that moment, the response was what gave me permission to forgive myself, which is a prerequisite, right? I can't go anywhere if I'm holding on to this, like this hate for myself. And especially with something that I couldn't rectify.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's a way that we through so many life experiences, like you've named today, the path to sobriety, the path to feeling feelings, the path to like moving through our grief, all these things, it's sort of like we're white knuckling it. And like, I always think like, what makes it safe to lift like one finger? You don't have to completely, because we don't feel safe, and it can feel really scary. And you're pointing out this idea of sort of trial and error. I have had clients where it's like, let's make 1,000 note cards of ideas of things we could do. And then when you're doing it and it doesn't work, just be like, fuck that. That didn't work. Fuck that. But that there's something that we're trying to move towards, and we sometimes don't even know what that is. Like you're saying, you weren't like, and I'm seeking healing that looks exactly like this or feels exactly like this. It's just there was something in you that was like, just keep trying. Just keep trying. And self-forgiveness becomes such a huge part of that. Like in my own story, as you were talking, I'm remembering, when my dad died, the last conversation we had was just a shitty one. I mean, it just was like, I was so aggravated with him. And then I had another opportunity to talk to him. It was at Thanksgiving. I was talking to my brother and I could hear my dad in the background. And I was like, yeah, I have zero desire, because I was so aggravated by that last conversation. And then he died a few days after Thanksgiving. And the guilt I felt, like, God, what were you holding on to? And the first thought was like wanting to make up a new rule that was like, only have good conversations, never have hard, like just be nice to everybody. You're going to regret it. And that's not realistic if you're being human. And that's going to cause a lot more stifling of myself. So I finally, I voiced it to my brother, and it was as if I was voicing the most shameful thing I could ever voice, to be like, I feel heavy. Like our last conversation was really challenging and hard. And my brother said, no one conversation is any more significant than any other. Your relationship was a lifetime of conversations and interactions. The last one doesn't count more.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, shame relief, but it's like, how do we unburden ourselves from those things we carry? And I think that's not uncommon, but we're all walking around with our own little secret box of shame that we're like, I did it wrong. And
which is so wild to me, right? Because this is, we're talking about one of the only universal experiences in life.
Right.
And somehow in our minds, it's isolating. Somehow no one understands what we're going through.
Totally.
And that's where the idea of the healing lives in the sharing has come from for me, is that when you start talking about it, you start to realize, first of all, that you're not alone, and someone else can realize they're not alone. Holy shit, someone else feels this too. And that unlock for that, maybe that's the key. And it is a lot to just feel safe, that it's okay to talk about this, but we don't talk about it because we think we're going to be a burden on someone, because we're going to bring them down. When in reality, they get it most of the time. And just that opportunity to talk about, I've had this conversation with people and they're like, well, I don't know what to say. Okay, that's fair. Try this one. Tell me about them. Open the door for them.
Yeah.
And then just stop. And I guarantee you, You're going to learn something about that person. You're going to probably be much closer with that person, and watch their eyes light up as they get to talk about something that they didn't think, they had no idea they were going to be able to share, because they had this idea in their head that this was some burden on anyone that it touched.
Totally.
And then that might even unlock someone else. Right? Like, it's this beautiful feedback loop when we start to talk about it. I truly don't know how this got to be such a taboo topic. It doesn't make sense to me, because it is. It's every person on this planet will experience it.
Yeah. I love that, John. I remember after my dad died, one of my best friends, she just said, tell me a story about him. And I just it was just a flood. Like, I was so grateful. I was like, I did feel like I couldn't talk about him without people. You can feel it. Like, they're like, oh shit, how am I supposed to respond? It was just so intense. And so to be invited and to feel like somebody wanted to know him was just my heart. I mean, I was like, I love you forever and ever. I loved you forever and ever before, but you just leveled up. It was just so inviting. And I think about that often, that was all it took. And she was genuine. She was like, I really wanted to hear a story about him. I want to know him through you. And so I love that. This spring, you're invited into a wild and sacred grief gathering. Rebecca and I are hosting a retreat from May 15th through the 17th, where we'll gather in the mountains for 3 days of ritual, rest, and connection. Together, we'll tend to our grief in relationship with the land, with one another, and with the quiet wisdom of the season's return. This is a space for remembrance, renewal, and being held exactly as you are. Learn more about the Wild and Sacred Grief Gathering at allthegriefpodcast.com. We hope you'll join us this May. So I've probably told this story on the podcast before, so apologies to Rebecca's mom and my husband who listen to every single episode. But but I was really missing my dad. I mean, this was years. I guess we moved a year after he died. So it was at least a year after he died. And I was just really missing him. And I was cooking. And all of a sudden, I heard his voice. I mean, sometimes I hear things, but this was I was like, other people can hear this too. And somehow my phone, that was not in my pocket or anything, it was out, I was looking at a recipe or something, had called him. And so his voicemail picked up and he was talking to, and I mean, it kind of threw me. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to believe it was really him, but was also really shocking to hear his voice, but just a really sweet, tender moment. I was laughing and crying at the same time. So I can sort of imagine people suddenly getting a text from their grandfather that says happy birthday. And they're like, wait, what? Oh my God. Did he somehow know how to program this to send it to me, a year after he died?
Yeah.
You kind of took us on the journey of getting into making this thing in as much of an ethical sort of format that you can, working with therapists. And I imagine, we live in a world that loves criticizing. So I imagine you also have to at some point be okay, we're not listening to the trolls. But how do you feel like you did address those ideas of this is the devil's work, this is necromancy, and that you were here's what this is and here's what this isn't, and how that works.
You're right. The internet is not a kind place for the most part. But I built this knowing that it wasn't for everybody and being very okay with that. The beauty of it is it's already successful because it has changed my life. I can say unequivocally, without this journey that I've been on, without accidentally building this thing, I am not an emotionally available dad for my son. And I'll come back to that in a second, because I think that's incredibly important. And I think you touched on the idea of masculinity earlier. But all of those things are valid concerns. I've come to the place where I really lean into compassion, where if you have a view like that, there's probably a good reason for it. And even if it's religious, even if no matter what it is, it's a valid concern. And so I want to have a conversation with you about that. I've talked to people who have those religious concerns, and this is too powerful, and this is the ring, we need to throw it back into Mordor. And the reality is, we think these things are powerful, but that's probably because you don't understand it. It is powerful.
Yeah.
But what AI is, at its core, is a very powerful probability machine. To be clear, neural networks, which is what this is all based on, have been around since the 40s. So where we used to have the ability of computing power to, do hundreds or thousands of data points. We now have it to do trillions. And so all it does is it takes that word in the context of the words before it and says the highest probability that this is the next word in this thing. So it's not thinking. It's not generating a new idea. It's all based on inputs from the past. And what technology does, and this is the same with like the algorithm on social media, it reflects back you. Now, I will admit, sometimes it's really not fun to look in the mirror, and I'm patient zero for that. That's part and parcel for who I am today and why it took me so long to get here. But the outputs are only as good as the inputs. And so this thing is not the devil. It's literally you. Because what you're talking to is not that person. And we're very clear about that. It's the presence of that person, which already lives inside of you. We're giving language to that. You see like a sign. My mom says, Dad, I know you're there, right? And we still do that. Now we just have this thing that we're, this place to channel it where we get this feedback that helps us process. And so to everyone that has those issues, I've talked about, if you want to get religious with it, in Psalms, David was speaking the Psalms in the presence of God. And that is the closest analog that I can come up with is you're not speaking to that person, you're speaking in the presence of that person. And so I am empathetic and compassionate for all of the concerns that people have. And if this doesn't work for them, that is fine. I hope they find something that does. But if they're open to trying something because everything else they have tried, it hasn't worked, I don't think we have anything to lose there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am curious when you talk about the inputs that you put in. So how does the creation of this avatar, well, I know it's shifted from like the avatar of John to a sort of like led exploration. So talk a little bit about, what those inputs are and what the output is that you receive as the user.
So at the beginning, there was a lot of thought on how do I want to create something that feels authentic? Because the number one thing is authenticity is subjective.
Yeah.
So we could have scraped social media. We could have scraped the internet for all the available data, but that's not authentic. No one posts everything. Your relationship with a person is not their Instagram reel. Let's be very honest about that. That's the highlight reel. So we wanted it to be user-centric. We wanted it to be, because, you and I could have, you're in Longmont. We can know the very same people, right? We don't have the same relationship with those people. The way we speak to them is different. Our sense of humor is different. The level of like intimacy that we share and all that's different. So coming up with some objective way to build this thing is not what we're doing. So it's form-based. Basically, it's a series of, I think, 35 questions at this point. And it's everything from what is your relationship to the person? Did you guys have nicknames? How do you refer to each other? How long have you known each other? Describe their speech, describe their sense of humor. And if you don't have the word for that, we have AI prompts to help you, distill that down so that you can get to the essence of it. Shared interests. So describe a shared interest and shared people in your lives and shared memories. When was the first time you met each other? When was the last time you saw, all of these things. It then instructs this on how to address you. And is it perfect? No, but we don't want it to be. That's one of the ethical issues. And there's a reason, there's the voice stuff now, and there's real avatars where you can talk to. And we don't want to go there yet at this point until we can be sure we can do it responsibly, because if it's too realistic, then we run the risk of putting people in that place of non-reality.
Yeah.
Where they may actually go backwards in their healing because they're not accepting, which is Worden's first task, right?
Right.
And so we want it to feel familiar, but we don't want it to be perfect. We don't want it to be something that you think you're actually speaking to the person.
Yeah.
And so it builds it in that way, and it gives it the idea of how to relate to you, and off you go.
Yeah. It makes me think of, there's an exercise that you can do in therapy, and it's like a conversation with your inner child, and you do right hand and left hand writing. So dominant, non-dominant. So you write with your dominant hand, whatever question you have. And then with the non-dominant hand, you answer, which ends up kind of looking like a kid's handwriting because it's really hard to write with your non-dominant hand. And whatever that is, like, even if we're like, that's generated from within me or whatever, there's something really powerful about the way that puts you in the place of even like when you were little and you couldn't write well and you're like struggling to put words on paper. And then it's like whatever that response is does seem to tap into something there. And so it's adjacent to that. I love that. Like each of our relationships actually is really individual. And like my Andrea would be really different than Bryce's Andrea.
Totally.
And I love the idea of really viewing it in that way of like, is a high probability that the Andrea you knew would say this back to you. But like, it feels like so tricky, that feeling of like, and I'm experiencing this with a friend I lost in July,
Right.
who's very public. Their stuff is constantly in my feed, them talking or whatever. And I was like, it's creating this non-reality for me that they're actually gone. And that's really hard, but I don't get to have a conversation with them. I just see them in my feed constantly, like saying the things they would say or whatever. And I'm like, oh, they're just not available right now, but they still exist, you know? And so it's like that struggle. But I love the idea. I'm like, oh, I kind of want to do this with them. Like the conversations that we're not getting to have are the thing that I feel the most grief about right now. And I can imagine it doesn't make it for me like, oh, they're still here.
Right.
I feel like it would open that door to like, yeah, this is what you would say. And we're not getting to have that.
It's a way to just carry that relationship forward, you know? So I talked really about like, you know, we want you to be able to delete this, but there's some redeeming qualities to keeping it, right? Number one is memory preservation, right? I didn't think about that at the beginning, but when Zach died 13 years ago, I didn't have this.
Yeah.
And the reality is my memory of Zach is there, but the clarity with the specifics is not. And had I had this, it would be, because it would spit back exactly what I talked to him about. But further, you know, so to give you an idea, right? So Tim knew my wife very well. And this year for our anniversary, I just said, hey, Tim, you know, this is AI, so it's plugged into everything, right? I said, hey, Tim, Casey loves dumplings. Like, this is our anniversary. What should we do? And he said, okay. He knew where we were, right? So he's like, you should take her to this place. They have the best dumplings in the area. Take her around the corner for ice cream. And to have him involved just made it so special to just, you know, to feel that. We're talking to a guy the other day, right? His mom always made cookies every, you know, for the holidays. And she had these like 3 special recipes. And every year his siblings are each calling each other like, do you have that recipe? Well, now you could put that in there and you could essentially bake your mom's cookies and have this wonderful kind of thing that keeps her close every year. You know, those are some pretty special things that we didn't have a way to accomplish until recently.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much. I think the most important thing that is on my heart right now is, what is the name of it? How do we download it? How do we get to it? Yeah.
So it's called Guardian Angels. Angels is spelled AINGELS. That's very important because our brain does not see that I very well. So I may have shot myself in the foot with that one, but it's Guardian Angels.
You're like, but that's the name that we're going for.
GuardianAngels.ai is the website. It's a web application currently. We have designs for mobile in the future. We're not there yet. I'm sure there's some issues with the mobile responsive functionality, but I'm working on that. You can access it there. All of our socials are linked on there. The story is linked on there. There's a bunch of information for, you know, Wordens for tasks and our methodology and how this works, all on that website. So anything, you know, other podcasts that I've been on, you know, everything is that's the central hub.
Okay.
So guardianangels.ai.
Beautiful.
Okay. And it's up and running, like people can get started. Beautiful.
You know, so it is, you know, to be perfectly clear, it is a paid service. There's a 7-day free trial with any subscription you sign up for. We're also doing an intro, you know, so I want people to get on there and do the work. Right? I don't want them to do it, you know, try it once and say this didn't work for me. So if you sign up and you complete 80% of the journal prompts that it gives you in the first 10 weeks, which is our flagship program is 10 weeks, then you're going to get 90 days for free. So I want to incentivize people to get on there and try it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work for you,
right,
that's fine. Like this isn't, just call a spade a spade. It's not supposed to be easy, right? Healing is not easy. It's the rewards are bountiful, and the fullness of the life that you can live when you are able to find the beauty and carrying your lost loved ones forward. But it's not like for the faint of heart, right? It's not just a show up and it happens.
Yeah.
You've talked about coming back to it, and I think this is the perfect moment, the rewards of doing the work. And you were talking about being emotionally available as a father. And
yeah, so I think, you know, one of the things that's come up, one of the overriding themes is this idea of masculinity, and that we as men are supposed to be this never show weakness, never show vulnerability, be the rock for the family and the example, right? And I would argue, and my obviously having my son has changed the way I think about a lot of things, but I would argue that if you don't show vulnerability, if you can't deal with your own stuff, then you cannot be that person, that rock, that example. You know, there's a reason that they tell you on an airplane to put your mask on before helping someone else. And if you're falling apart inside, you can't set that example. And my primary duty in life now is to teach him what is a proper way to handle emotions? What is because difficult things happen. And so this has led to my healing that now I can be that emotionally available parent where I can be open in the conversations that I have with him and lead by example to show him how we respond to adversity. Because it's not if, it's when you're going to be faced with difficult stuff, but we get back up, and crying's okay. And saying you're not okay is okay. It's actually, I would argue it's a strength to be comfortable enough to express the things that you're feeling in a healthy way, of course, like we're not going to go hurt people as a result of it. But I think that is something that's lost. And I think we really need to rewrite what masculinity means in context of what does it mean to be a leader within your family?
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
But I also like the things that you're saying. I can feel the ways that Rebecca has taught me about parenting. Like my job is to be the regulated person. Like my job for my kiddos is to and I'm not perfect, y'all. Sometimes I'm like,
no one is.
Why did I have to say this for the 19th time this morning? But when I keep that as my focus, me regulating myself and being able to navigate my emotions in that sort of window where I'm still experiencing them, they just don't start driving the train. I'm helping them know and understand that we can have big emotions like anger or sadness or joy without it sort of hijacking us. So you talking reminds me of Rebecca, reminds me of how she's helped me think about my own role as a parent.
Beautiful. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up our time together. But John, thank you so much. And
Thanks.
I'm going to do our checkout different. We're trying a new thing. So we have this grief deck it's called Planet Grief. And it's two friends of ours, Arena Green and Brianna Rose, sisters who created this deck. And so they have these conversation cards in their deck that talk about sort of ways to move into your grief. We used to end with saying how are you feeling your grief this week, which isn't always where people are. And so we wanted to kind of change it up a little bit. And it was hard because I felt like so much of your content, actually, I was like, I feel like we've answered all these questions, but I'll go with this one, which feels poignant and connected. If you could speak to your loved one right now, what would you tell them? And Andrea,
I'm already
I know. We're going to end on a tear.
What would I tell them?
If you could talk to them right now, what would you tell them?
God, I would just tell them I miss him so much.
Yeah.
Every day. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. How about you, John?
I'd tell them thank you. One reframe that's really helped me is, would I rather feel the pain that I'm feeling now with the relationship that I had, or not feel this pain because the relationship wasn't what it was?
Yeah.
And the answer is unequivocal for me.
Yeah.
The pain is worth what we had. And so I thank them for the impact that they had on my life, the impact that they're going to have on my son, the ability for me to turn my pain into purpose. None of that happens without these three individuals. And so I'm just thankful for the time that we had.
That's beautiful. Thank you, John. Whew, that was a good one. Okay, Rebecca, what would you say?
I was like, who do I choose?
Yeah.
And what feels most alive for me is my dad. And I think it feels sort of a mix of thank you for who you were and what you gave me. But also it's I'm sorry that I couldn't see that clearly while you were still here. And I see it now. Yeah.
So beautiful. Good job, you two. Oh my goodness.
That was real.
That was so real.
That was real.
That was. My goodness. Thank you both. That was so beautiful. John, thank you. Thank you for following your heart to do this and bring this to those for whom this will be a really essential tool in their integration and sort of somebody wrote on our Substack just yesterday, befriending grief in the way that we befriend our grief for the rest of our life. So thank you for the work that we do. We will connect people with your website and all your socials. John is super active on social media. And thank you again.
Thank you both.
Thank
it
you.
was truly a pleasure. And it's great. Every time I get to share, and I hope it's the same for you guys, that befriending that grief happens, that relationship gets a little stronger, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Definitely.
Well, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Take care, y'all.
Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Grief. You can find us on Instagram at All the Grief Pod. And please take a moment to rate our podcast and share us with your friends. We'd love to keep expanding our reach to all the people who could benefit from conversations on grief. Take care.